Travel Blog Part 3, the city of Berlin is a manifestation of a way the society was organized, in particular, starting in the mid-19th century when Germany became a nation state. And a nation states, of course, wasn't, the nation state wasn't an invention by Germany. So there's other cities in Europe that reflect this, but I just want to use Berlin because I'm here right now. And this is part of the travel blog. So what I'm trying to do is sort of look at the city and try to understand why does it look the way it looks, and then see that some of the government structures that were implemented in the mid-19th century around the nation state, around strong government, army, around professional services such as lawyers and then doctors, and then like even let's say yesterday I went to a place called Dalmar, which is a coffee shop, a coffee chain, which used to cater to the emperor. They have a big office here somewhere in the middle of Berlin, showing all the history and all that. So you can see like all these professional services that were set up around in the city around the governance structure, which was centrally planned, strong government, absolute power, all these things. I want to use this as a starting point to discuss another interesting topic, and that is today. Where do we stand today? We're on the brink of a new governance structure, which is going to be driven by crypto, a new way of contract law, a new way of dealing with each other, and that also raises the question: okay, how is society going to be organized in the context of that new technology? So those are interesting topics. I want to use this as an oral essay, in an open essay also, which means I don't really have a conclusion here. I'm not reading off notes. This is unscripted, me thinking out loud, trying to understand what we're facing right now, because I feel that crypto is a massive, massive revolution in terms of how society is going to be organized. Forget about all the business opportunities. This is even bigger than that. This is going to change the way society is organized, because it is changing contract law. It is changing the way things are decided in society, and that is what ultimately shapes the way societies are organized and the way people live. This is Not Even Wrong podcast. It's June 3rd, 2022. This is Krim Delco. For the day, the fund is up 4%. The market is up 1%. For the year, we're down 37.5%. The market is down 11.5%. We're underperforming by 26%. Now, let me start with where we are today, and then I'm going to shift over to the crypto side of things. So where we are today is we're walking around the streets of Berlin. Berlin is one of the big cities of Europe. It manifests itself in a way that was shaped throughout the 19th century and early part of the 20th century. Of course, there was a big disruption after World War II, but nevertheless, the city's structure still reflects this large nation state organized by a central power, and it doesn't really matter if it's an emperor, a dictator, or even a democratically elected government like today. It's still the same. So one of the things which is interesting is that we have a certain structure, a certain way of governing ourselves, which is we have people in charge, and those people in charge are supported by an army of professionals, by bureaucrats and professionals, in particular lawyers, but also in general we had this birth of the professional service in the mid-19th century, which is the doctor, the lawyer, the accountant, all of these things. Of course, they existed before, but not in this way, because we had a much, much bigger problem to solve. We had let me parse that a little bit. If we go back, let's say, to the pre-Renaissance Europe. Pre-Renaissance Europe was a bunch of feudalists, a bunch of dukes and kings, and the church running things. Everybody had their piece of land. People were tilting the land, and money was made on the land, and then sometimes through wars, and that's really about it. There was no need for a lot of contract law. Doctors and all that stuff wasn't around because the knowledge wasn't there, and the contract law was more or less the duke deciding whatever whatever he needed to decide. So then we have the Renaissance, which is the birth of the small city-state in Italy and other places around Europe, also Augsburg and places like that here in Germany. And what happened there is that we have the birth of professional services, but at a small scale. So we have accountants, doctors, lawyers. We have contract law, which is part of the introduction of the Renaissance. The Renaissance wasn't just going back to the Roman Empire and taking the arts and all that from them, but also the contract law. Roman law is even today taught in, let's say, in law schools around Europe. So, but what we have in Berlin now, what manifests itself is the same idea. So we have a city which is based on, a country, a whole society based on contract law. However, that country is now much bigger, and the prizes are much bigger in a sense that now we're looking at trying to, let's say, conquer other countries in Europe, trying to conquer colonies, trying to be bigger. So if you're bigger, you need a bigger city, you need more space, you need bigger roads, bigger buildings. You just have a lot more people catering to the central power. And this is what we're looking at today, walking through the streets of Berlin, which is this large nation state run by professional services, still in the sort of context of there is a law. So there's a place where law is made, an authority. There's a place where law is executed, an authority. And this is, I think, the big change that we're looking at today with, let's say, crypto. What we're looking at with crypto is the following. Now we're changing the way society has been organized. We're taking away the authority. So we still need to organize ourselves in a way that, let's say, the primitives are still there. We need to know what is and what isn't. We need to understand what we can do and what we can't do. We need to understand what the punishments are for doing something that, let's say, we're not supposed to do. However, the big difference in the crypto world versus the sort of the world that we're living in today, the big difference is that the deciding entity is not an authority. So we're not going to be looking at a big building which says the Ministry of X. What we're going to look at is something else. And this is the question. This is part of this oral essay where I'm trying to reminisce a little bit about what to expect going forward. But before I go there, let's just talk about the city here. So we're in Berlin, walking around, and it's kind of scary in a way because, you read Aldous Huxley, the Ministry of Information, the Ministry of Love, the Ministry of this, the Ministry of that. Well, we actually we still live in a world like that. Well, fine, it doesn't say the Ministry of Love, it says the Ministry of the Interior, the Ministry of Work. But actually we use these types of names, we use these types of expressions. And sometimes, particularly maybe living in Silicon Valley and being so entrenched in the whole crypto conversation, you almost feel like this is a caricature. You almost feel like this is a caricature in the sense that, are we really running ourselves this way? Are we organized in this particular way that we have these big ministries and people deciding about us and all that? It's interesting. I mean, I'm sure people here in Europe, they don't think too much about this, or at least those who aren't involved in the big conversation about crypto. So what is new about crypto? Yesterday, Andreessen Horowitz's A16Z podcast published an interesting open essay about crypto. And they said one fundamental thing, which, by the way, shout out to them. As usual, most of their content really is incredibly useful and interesting and inspiring to me. And just shout out to them. What they said is the following. So we have an innovation that we today call the internet, which is we have TCP/IP, we have packets that are standardized and that are therefore allowing us to transmit information fast through a network. This is what the internet is. And then this is Web 1. We have Web 2, which is the same thing, but instead of one to many, we have many to many, social networking and all that stuff. What we have now with Web3 is the combination of two things. We have the block, that's why it's called the blockchain. So the block is a new way of a new computing primitive, and we have the ability to go social, but we also have the ability now to do that without a platform. In other words, without an authority, and this is Web3. So Web3 is many to many based on a compute paradigm or compute primitive. So that means innovation can be done very fast, and it's not authoritative. So that means that the decision of what is and what isn't is within the protocol. So the protocol itself decides what is and what isn't, or maybe in modern lingo, what it means is we have smart contracts. And I think I want to use this as a springboard now to discuss what I think we are looking at in the next 10 to 20 years, maybe even faster, which is a complete reorganization of society. If we can get away from authoritative decision making, authoritative being like there's a central authority, a ministry of something, we can get away from that, and we can use a new primitive to decide what is and what isn't, which is this sort of crypto thing. Well, then I think our society will be reorganized. We don't need a thought. We basically, let's say, we don't need lawyers as much. We don't need courts. We don't need people deciding. There's no ministry of this and that because it's in the contract. Now, what do I mean practically with that? Well, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to understand, but take one example that people in the Web3 community are always touting, which is the idea that, let's say, if you join a network, let's say you have a new Facebook, or take a video game, actually, that's a better one, and this whole play to earn type thing. So you have, let's say, a video game, and you join that video game, and you get paid by the content. So the more you play, the more you get paid, and the earlier you join, the more you get paid. So this is a way to compensate people for participating in, let's say, a video game. So that way you build a network much faster. So one of the big things, let's say, in Web 2 has been network effects. You know, Union Square Ventures has made a career going around saying, well, we invest in things with network effects. And there's, of course, the question also, how good are network effects actually? Some network effects are better than others. Not every network effect is the same. All of these questions are fair to assume. My point here is the following. If you start with a fundamental primitive of, let's say, I'm building a network X, and these are the things I want people to be incentivized to do within the network. Okay? So I want people to, let's say, participate in this thing that I'm building. I want to call it Twitter 2.0, and I want to disincentivize trolling. I want to incentivize good conversation. If you participate in good conversations, you get compensated. If not, you get not compensated, and so on and so forth. You see where I'm going here is that you can start with a much better designed network, and this is sort of the promise of Web3. And that's, I think I'm absolutely subscribing to that because I can see the problems, I can see the solution, and all that's missing now is, of course, the implementation, the entrepreneur that actually executes. And we have a venture capital industry that takes care of that problem. So it's very highly likely that in the next, let's say, 5 years, we will have a competing network to Twitter, a competing network to Facebook, and so on and so forth. This is part of the reason I think why Facebook and Twitter and all these social networks are at least losing some of the appeal, if not actually losing their ground within the context of being the monopoly, the network of the future, and all of these things. I would say this is a very good summary of what's going on as far as the business prospects of these networks is concerned. Now, my conversation here is, it started with Berlin and the city and sort of the way people are organized. And I want to keep that track because it's a little bit, it's like one gets carried away because you have so many ways to look at it. So again, I have a way to organize society which is better. It's different, and it allows for more optionality. Right? This is Caramelletto 101, which is okay. We have more counterfactuals. We have more if this or that type of situations in life. So this is good. This is what innovation actually means. This is why we expect innovation to happen, because we increase optionality in society. Web3 increases societal optionality. It will happen. I can do more. I can create better networks. I can create better games. I can create better X. It's just better. It's more efficient. For example, even things like DeFi. Okay, take DeFi as an example. Okay, why is DeFi interesting? Is it really important that we can speculate with cryptocurrencies? Of course not. Who cares? But here's what we actually care about. We can create things, let's say contracts, that allow people to, let's say, borrow money and do certain things with that money. And we can embed whatever the incentive structure of that contract is within the contract. So we don't have to go around and force that contract in court. Let's say I can say in a future banking environment, I might say, look, you can buy a house, and I want you to always use 50% of your earnings to service the mortgage. And if you don't do that, then you're going to be punished. Now, of course, there's some surveillance, privacy issues here, but let's put that aside. Like, you could actually do something like that. And you could have a much more flexible financial services industry where I can opt for a contract that I say, I'm buying this house and you're not going to tell me however I'm going to spend my money, and that's going to be more expensive than maybe a contract where they're going to say, well, I am actually going to tell you how to spend your money, but you can get your credit a lot cheaper. So there's a lot more optionality. Okay, this is the fundamental takeaway from this. But now let me try to explain also what I mean with people living differently, organizing ourselves differently. Because with crypto, we have the opportunity to reorganize society. So we don't need, like when we say something like, let's say, we don't need a platform anymore. The platform doesn't decide what developers and people who participate within the platform do. What that means is, in practical terms, well, we don't need a big headquarter in Menlo Park that's called Facebook headquarters. Okay, if the platform doesn't matter, that means there's no central authority that decides what is and what isn't. And if there's no central authority which decides what is and what isn't, well, then we have a new way of organizing ourselves, a new way of living. We're more decentralized. Also, if decision-making is more decentralized, then maybe also living is more decentralized. So this decentralization theme, this whole remote work theme, I think it's overlapping here, because of course remote work has a bad rap now because it's coming out of COVID, and it's being used by some people just to pretend they work and they don't work and all that stuff. And I don't want to get into that conversation. The point here is that we have a possibility with Web3 to also reorganize the way we live. That's the point. And to me, that's an interesting point. Like, architecture reflects the way people organize themselves. That's why Florence looks different than Berlin, and Berlin looks different than New York. What is New York? New York is the city where whatever Berlin had to do in terms of organizing themselves, hiring professionals to run paper push, if you want, well, New York had to do that at a much bigger scale. That's why we have the skyscrapers. Or you can say maybe also because of the skyscrapers, we were able to do it at a much bigger scale. If we didn't have the skyscrapers, we wouldn't have been able to squeeze that many people onto the island of Manhattan, and therefore we would have had maybe a couple of cities spread around the Northeast taking over all these functions versus one. Why did New York win versus others? Well, it's a winner takes it all business. It's a network effect. All of these things played a role back then too. But the point here is that we're getting away from at least the need to have a central authority and a central city, a central place to live and a central place to work. We're getting away from that. And I guess the first conclusion out of this statement is that we're probably going to see people more spread around. And the reason is simply that's easier, it's more efficient. Like everything decentralized, like you only want to centralize if the advantages of centralization are so much bigger. Like again, take Manhattan. There's so many downsides in living in New York: high cost of living, noise, pollution. But the upside has always been, well, you are there where everybody else is, so you can take, your productivity goes up, your chances of meeting important people are going up, and all of those things. And all of that now is changing with Web3. And the city of the future, I guess my question here is really, what is the city of the future going to look like? Based on the idea that Web3 is going to deauthorize decision making. That's the key. That's the key question of this open essay. What is the city of the future going to look like? Understanding that we have Web3 and a decentralization of society. And the answer is open. I'm going to leave this open because I don't know what the answer will be like. My guess is it's going to be more decentralized. My guess is people will find more places where they can play and work versus just go for work and then play wherever you find. So in other words, go to New York and then, I don't know, figure out a way to go to the beach if you can afford it. If not, don't go to the beach. I don't know. Like it will be more along those lines because there's certain needs people have in terms of being around family, being around nature. I think those needs don't change. They're innate. We're natural. The biggest punishment for humans when they do criminal acts is isolation. We take them away from people and take them away from nature. So those are things we need, and we will still need them. But of course, we also need the ability to be creative and work and produce and be positive and contribute. I think we all need that. And Web3 is looking to give us an opportunity to reshape the creative side of things, the productive side, while keeping this natural desire to be around nature and family. So I want to finish this essay with that, because again, I don't have an answer. I'm just saying I can see a future where we're more decentralized, where we're more choosing to live according to the most productive. So we're going to look where we're most productive, but we're also going to take into account other things like maybe quality of life. It is increasing our optionality. And by the way, technological innovations have always increased our optionality. When we went from agriculture to machining and then digitization of life, it took away a lot of burden from society and people. Let's say we didn't have to till our own soil to eat. We were able to buy it in the supermarket because technology enabled that. So we are decentralizing. We've been decentralizing all along, but I think this is a big one because it reminds me of the Renaissance, where we go from an authority, which is the church, to an authority, which is the law. Now we're going from the authority, which is the law, to an authority, which is the web, the actual protocol, the smart contract. It's still law, but it's embedded within the contract. It's embedded within the platform. So the platform becomes the law at the same time. It's not like there's a platform, let's say Facebook, and then there's a law, a lawyer, and the court, and all that, which decides how Facebook is supposed to act relative to its users. No, it's all in one. And that, again, will open up opportunities for a new organization of businesses, a new organization of governments, and also a new way of living. Thank you.